Hello, my name is Murray Smith. I'm a principal at Smith & Farmer, a sales consulting firm in Dallas, Texas. And the presentation that I'm going to give you all today is called Sales Management Training with some Forecasting Secrets. Now, understand that sales management is also for salespeople as well. I mean, obviously salespeople are managed by managers and owners, but I think what a lot of this is going to do is help sales overall. And also I'm going to leave you with a process that'll help you with sales management. The objectives today are this: more sales. But how am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to show you how. Learn how to build a sales process. Process is very important, and this is going to also be a process for sales management. A process for sales management gets all of you on the same page. It gets you on the same page as your reps and the managers. It's going to set expectations on performance, and it's going to add real accountability to your sales department. Okay, everybody will know what to expect. I'm also going to show you how to create a magic formula for forecasting sales, and I'm also help you understand why forecasting sales is important. Now, how am I going to do all this? Well, I'm going to prove to you that sales is an art and a science. Okay, it's not just a salesperson is born, not made. I think most people think that sales is a talent, but I also want you to understand that it's also a science. It is a talent because robots can't and will never be salespeople. I mean, it's always going to take a salesperson that understands when to move forward, when to back off, when to get aggressive, when to be passive, when to use metaphors. It's always been a relationship. It's not something that can just be spat out over the phone or spat out through an automated system. Now, if you're going to embrace this, you also have to be able to use this. And I'm going to prove to you that it works. But it's also beautiful in its simplicity. I usually begin these presentations apologizing. I mean, 20 years ago, that's what I did. I would apologize before each one of these presentations because it's so simple. I would have thought that everybody has heard this before. And it's still amazing to this day how so many people that I do this presentation before, and I've done it over and over again, have never heard it before. This is like magic or really unique to a lot of people. So here's something else that I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you everything. This is not like, well, I'm going to keep my secrets to myself and you have to pay me $1 million for me to teach you my secrets. No, I'm going to tell you everything on this presentation. And based on the clock right now, we've got about 45 minutes left, and it's going to get more and more interesting. And I think it will be something that you've never heard before. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Which would you rather manage, the traffic jam on the left or the train station on the right? Now, I've been in sales a long time, and to be honest with you, managing a team of sales reps, it's always hard. It's always a mess. If you were a transportation manager and your job was to move goods or people from point A to point B, just like you're doing right now in your sales organization, you're selling a product, you're getting it out of your company's hands into your customers' hands. In a sense, you're kind of the same here. You're moving a flow down a path. If you're looking at both of these pictures, even though both looks kind of complicated, kind of a mess, for me, I'm going to take the train tracks and the train station on the right, because if you have the right processes and systems and software and automated processes in place, at least you can say, okay, I've got 10 cars on track 1, I've got 15 cars on track 2, here's the schedule, here's the process, and you could eventually move those cars, in my opinion, out of the station easier than trying to move a big mess of cars down a highway with flat tires and personalities. And at least you have, I think, an opportunity for a better system on the right. And that's going to be my point. Another advantage to a custom selling system is that it is going to increase your sales performance simply by its nature. I mean, like I said in the last slide, tracks are harder to mess around with than roads. I mean, at least you've got a path that those cars are going to have to move down, right? At least with a highway, a freeway, anything can happen at any point in time. But at least you have a process by which you're trying to manage with tracks. Also, with a simple reporting system, you're going to keep everybody on the same page. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When everyone's reporting off of an agreed process, then a manager or an owner can work with a sales rep and look at a report, look at a process and say, okay, we're trying to go from point A to point B, right, Mr. or Ms. Sales Rep? Okay, well, if everyone agrees to that, then everybody's working off a page, off of a process. And that's a whole lot easier to manage than a personality. I mean, my experience with salespeople are, the old metaphor, it's like herding cats. It really is. Salespeople as a profession, a professional salesperson that takes it seriously, and even some that don't, it's like herding cats. You're dealing with a lot of different personalities, their own problems and quirks and issues. So a process keeps at least everybody on the same page, and that's a whole lot easier to manage than an individual personality. Here's my favorite reason for a custom selling system. It's less stressful. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When you have the ability to predict, when you have the ability that you know what's going on, even if you have a train station with 10 million train cars in there and locomotives and boxcars and cabooses and all different kinds of cars, you have a job to do, right? You have a process, and you just have to work that process. Okay? And that comes with a certain type of confidence that eliminates a lot of stress. And I just can't help but think that managing a bunch of train cars and box cars is easier than managing, if you had to even do that, I don't think anybody even really does that, managing a traffic jam. So if you have, like I said, the ability to manage a process, you're going to end up with a lot less stress, because no matter what pace everything happens at least you have the opportunity to control that pace and to control that system. And your stress levels are going to go way down. Now, you can sell very aggressively, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, where you don't have a system or process in place, but I don't think you can do that forever without going crazy. So I think less stress in a professional sales environment is extremely important. And with the selling system, you have forecast ability. You do have the ability to plan. Now, also with a custom selling system, you also have expectations that can be established and established by your manager, established by the rep, and you can work to those benchmarks. We'll certainly talk more about that in a minute, but that's also something that reduces stress as well. Okay, now I think it's important for me to introduce myself in a little bit more detail. Obviously, my name is Murray Smith, and I graduated in 1986 from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, SMU. And I've been an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur all my life, and I believe that really and truly everybody's a salesperson. All of my business have always been sales driven. It's usually finding a need in the marketplace and then filling it. I mean, that's what an entrepreneur does. And I think a salesperson is key to that success and driving revenue. So essentially I've been in sales my whole life. I did have a consulting firm, like I said, it's been 15, 18 years now. And I did the same thing. I made the same presentation. And I feel like in this economy, in this environment, there's a need more than ever for this type of help. The Smith & Farmer consulting firm was established in 2011, comes with a lot of existing experience, relationships, and proven success. And that's where I'm going with this. There are 4 different types of salespeople. There are consciously competent, consciously incompetent, unconsciously incompetent, and unconsciously competent. Everyone falls in one of those 4 categories. These are people, consciously competent, they're good at sales, and they know why they're good in sales. Going diagonally, there are the unconsciously incompetent, which are the people that are not any good in sales, and they have no clue why they're not any good at sales. They're just absolutely clueless. There are people that are good in sales, but they don't know why they're good in sales. They think they're good, but they're for the wrong reasons. And then there are those that are not any good in sales, and they know why they're not any good at sales. So let's tackle each one of these. There's the unconsciously incompetent. Now, I also put in here, or why I hate sales. These are people that figure if they're not any good at sales, they're not going to like sales. I mean, that stands to reason. Now, maybe some of you have coworkers or you've worked with people like this. These are people that'll say, well, I feel a bit lost, or I don't really feel comfortable pushing people. I don't like asking for money. I don't really know if the customer's going to buy or not. I don't really know how to predict my own future. I don't have any control over my future. Don't really know if I'm going to hit quota. I really don't know if I'm going to have a job. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard that before. Next, you have the consciously incompetent. Again, why I hate sales. These are people that you might hear them say, I really want to go work somewhere else, or I really hate my job, or I hate my sales manager, I hate this company, or I have an idea for my own business, or I bet I can make more money selling something else. Or I'm really not trained right, or my company doesn't really know what's going on. They're really clueless here. Or I'm in sales because the company always needs salespeople, right? I'm good at interviewing. I don't really like sales. I'm really more of a XXXX person, like a customer service person or a technical person or an engineering person. They're making excuses why they really aren't any good at sales. Next, we have the unconsciously competent. Now, I figured if they're competent, they're going to like sales. These are people that might be your big Tony Robbins fans, the emotional selling, the rah-rah selling. They'll say things like, well, my ego makes me powerful, or I'm a natural-born salesman or saleswoman, or not everybody can sell, but I can. Salespeople are born, not made. Customers love my personality. I'm a winner. The money over there in your pocket belongs in my pocket. That's the way I look at every sales situation. I expect to win, and so I do. I read self-help books all the time, and it keeps me going every single day. Now here's the thing. If you're making sales, that's great. If you're happy with that, that's fine. The problem that I have with that is that it's extremely stressful. It's just hard to keep going like that day after day, week after week, month, year. It's hard to stay in that mode without feeling stressed and burning out. Okay, so I've met a lot of great salespeople like that. It's interesting, traditionally, a lot of your sales managers are this type of personality. They were real strong salespeople that the owner elevated to sales manager. They got promoted to sales manager. It many times ruined his best sales rep. It ended up being somebody who wanted to get promoted. The owner didn't necessarily know how to really give him any more, couldn't necessarily give him more money. Maybe they did, and then they made a manager out of him. But that sales rep all of a sudden was put into kind of a weird situation. They were great at selling, but they might not always be that great at managing. So hopefully this will help some of you if some of you are listening to this presentation right now. Now you've got the consciously competent. Now, who are these people? These are people that understand that sales is a process. They understand how to predict their sales. Okay, they understand how to forecast. They have the confidence that deals with facts, not emotions. It's a person that can listen and knows how to ask the right questions. They also know how to shut up when it's important to shut up. They have control. They also know how to let people sell themselves. And they'll also not necessarily do very much, or they feel like they're not really doing very much. It's funny, years ago when I did this, I had a group of telemarketers that were working for me, and I could always tell when they were in control. You know how? Because when I'd hear them on the phone, all right, and I'd be sitting, in the room, and I'd hear them and watch them, they'd be doing this on the phone. Okay. Okay. They were listening. They were listening to that prospect talk. Now, of course, every now and then they'd ask a question to get them to talk and get them to start asking the right questions. But usually it's the chatterboxes are not the ones that are in control. They think they're in control. Those are your sometimes unconsciously competent ones, but they can also be their unconsciously incompetent as well. Okay, I have a question for you sales managers that are listening to this. How would you answer these questions? If I asked you point blank right now, what do you predict your sales are going to be this month? If I asked you how many deals will close next month, could you tell me? In other words, how do you forecast? And what are the benchmarks in your sales cycle? How do you specifically overcome objections? To continue, what do you do in your sales meetings with your reps? Are your sales rep meetings more like, okay, who has, how many deals do you have going on? Betty, tell me how many deals you have going. Does that sound like a typical sales meeting? How do you know if your sales reps are doing well? Are they just numbers on the board, or do you have a mechanism to interpret their pipeline of deals? How do you know the quality of their pipeline? Is it fluff, or are they real opportunities? How do you manage your reps? What are your expectations for your reps? How does a rep know when they're doing well? Is it just closed business on the board, or do they understand their pipeline of business? And what really makes a good sales manager? Do you know? And what is the process your sales managers will use to manage your own reps? Okay, here we go for sales reps. Sales reps, how would you answer these questions? What are your sales going to be this month, next month, and this year? What kind of sales does your sales manager expect from you? How do you know what good is? How high is high? How low is low? What dollar amount is considered good? How do you predict your sales? How do you know if any given prospect will close a deal? And what are the odds that any deal will close? Do you just kind of guess, or do you have a real system of knowing those odds? And how do you get a wobbly deal back on track? When they say, let me think about it, thank you very much. How do you know whether or not they're really interested or not? Do you have a process for that? Okay, now what I want you to do is take all the information that we've been talking about so far and kind of tuck it to the side, put it to the side. And you see I have a picture here of a dartboard. Okay, we're going to talk about something that I didn't do that great in high school, which is statistical analysis. Okay, and some of this will take you back to high school when maybe you had some statistical analysis classes. But again, I want you to forget everything we talked about so far for a second and imagine this. If you were to give me, Murray Smith, a dartboard like I had when I was 10 years old in my parents' house, and a bunch of darts with sharp points on it, and I'm not that great at darts, and I started throwing darts at a dartboard. If I throw one dart, who knows where it'll go? If I throw 2 darts, who knows where it'll go? But if I throw 100 darts, I'm willing to bet that in a very short period of time, I'll make a pattern. Now, I'm not really that great at darts, as I told you, so maybe that pattern would be clumping to the right or clumping to the left. Or when I was 10, they were all over my parents' plaster wall, tearing up their wall. Whatever it is, with certain variables, I'm going to get a certain pattern, right? So my point is, whatever you're talking about, whether you're talking about darts on a dartboard being thrown by a certain individual, if you are counting birds, if you had absolutely unlimited time and you're looking out the window, over a period of time you'd see birds fly by in a certain either pattern or time period. The pattern might not be as obvious, but over a period of time, during days or nights or wherever, you would be able to see patterns, right? Just like throwing a dart, you would see a pattern. Now, someone who's a professional dart thrower, which I am not, might throw darts and they might be a lot more accurate. The scores would be higher, but you'd still see a pattern, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Bubbles in a glass, rain falling down on a window pane, dots on a wall, or stars in the sky. Whatever it is, whatever you're talking about has a pattern to it. Okay, so my point here is everything in nature can be measured, right? It doesn't have anything to do with emotion or skill or anything. It's just the fact that whatever variables you're dealing with, whatever it is, throwing a ball, catching a fish, anything, everything can be measured. So this is a bell curve. This is just a picture that I found on Google, which is just basically saying most stuff happens in a certain period of time. Less stuff happens either in a less period of time or in off periods of time. However you want to categorize it, it's basically saying that any event, anything that happens through a period of time will eventually show a pattern. And that pattern can be graphed in some type of bell curve. That's my only point here. So everything that I've described, even the statistical analysis and even the sales stuff, competent, incompetent, is all simple, stupid, easy, right? Easy as baking cookies. Okay, so nothing here is complicated, right? I just want to make that really clear. We're not talking about anything complicated in the least. I want you to understand that there are a few truths that we'll embrace as it relates to sales. Okay, the first part is real important. No one buys anything unless they want it or need it. Okay, so you should never be scared of losing a sale because you didn't talk somebody into something. One thing that I do is I do sales consulting. I believe that I can probably help anybody in your company that's watching this. However, if you don't want this or need this or don't feel like you do, then I'm not worried about it one bit. I mean, that's for you to decide. So I never worry about trying to push something on somebody. If you did, or if I did, that would be an insincere, unethical sale. Somebody would have buyer's remorse. There'd be a problem. If your company is selling something that's unethical, then I think you need to reevaluate what you're doing with that company. That company won't be there for very long, regardless how many people push it and how many people they have in their sales force. You have to sell something that somebody wants or needs. Now, I don't mind helping people realize that they need it. And I'll get into that here in a second, but I needed to lay the foundation, the framework of setting this up for you as I'm describing this, okay? Another truth, people buy benefits and they talk about features, okay? You can get stuck hearing somebody talk about how fast the Corvette is, how interesting the Corvette, what a beautiful car a Corvette is, how fast does the Corvette go. Those are all features. But benefits, why do you want to go 150 miles an hour? Why do you want a convertible top? What do you care about tires like this? Those are the benefits. And so people will actually buy that. Always tell the truth. I would fire any rep that didn't tell the truth. You always have to tell the truth. A prospect will sell themselves. You just have to ask the right questions and then shut up and then be quiet. Okay? So I'm giving you a little clue. By the way, within this presentation, if you're seeing this presentation, you're probably seeing it online. And it really pains me that I can't be there sitting with you at the same table, because there are going to be light bulbs going off here in a minute. And if you look around the room where you are right now listening to this, you have coworkers, bosses, employees, and lights are going to be going off. And I hope that you'll send me an email, msmith, that's Murray Smith, at msmith@customsellingsystem.com. And I don't care when it is. I don't care when you see this video and see this presentation. If you want to send me an email and say, Murray, the light bulb went off, it'll just make me feel good. Personally, my own little ego standpoint. Let's continue. Okay, what is the sales cycle? This is key to this presentation. A sales cycle is a unit of time, and that's why I put a clock here on the left and a path here on the right. And this picture on the right is a perfect metaphor for a sales cycle with respect to the way I'm going to be discussing a sales cycle. A sales cycle is from the beginning, when you first talk to a prospect, until you get money in the bank. However period of time, whatever period of time goes by in that process, first talking to a prospect until you get money closed in the bank, is your sales cycle. So at McDonald's selling hamburgers, their sales cycle is what? 30 seconds, 45 seconds? If you are selling nuclear reactors to a country, a sales cycle might be 20 years. You know, by the time you work through all the bureaucracy and blueprints and regulatory agencies and go through that whole entire process, then it could be years and years and years. And so most products or services fall somewhere in between McDonald's and nuclear reactors, okay? But it's a period of time. Something else that I want you to notice on this picture here on the right, these are steps, right? Notice this. There are trees, there are forests, but getting from the bottom step, you know, taking a first step, until the top step, that very top step way up there at the top, taking that step, they're the same distance, right? Those are all steps, right? Just one step to the next step. One is not any harder than the other. I mean, if you, for some reason, wanted to be on the bottom step and you wanted to make one big flying leap to the top step, that would be nearly impossible, right? But it's so funny. That's what so many sales managers and owners want their sales reps to do. Close the deal, close the business, jump to the top step. Because everybody's under cash flow crunches and wants to see sales and everybody's revenue driven. Okay, that's great. But I think taking one step up this path, up the sales cycle, is a whole lot easier than making one big entire leap. Another thing, like when I think about my 6-year-old son, he loves to put hamburgers in his mouth, one big enormous bite, stuffing the whole thing in his mouth. And I'm like, Murray, he's Murray the third, and I say, Murray, wouldn't it be easier to just take one bite, chew it up? Now, you can take small bites, you can take big bites, that's up to you. But if you take bites, one bite at a time, it's a whole lot easier. And the last bite is not any harder to bite, chew, and swallow than any other bite, right? So keep that in mind here. Okay, let's talk about a sales cycle basic. What is a sales cycle? I mean, starting on the left-hand side, what do? You build the relationship, you qualify the lead, you discover their needs, you present a solution, you negotiate and close. Then you start over and do it again with the same customer and a different product and another sale or another lead, right? So it's all basically the same. And there's tons of information out there about sales cycles. So again, this is not a very difficult concept. So how do you build your sales cycle? What you do is you start with existing data. And you have existing sales data. And by the way, as a consultant, that's what we do at Smith & Farmer. We help you build your sales cycle and identify your sales cycle for you and put all those steps in there. Again, if you don't need us, then this is how to do it. I'm going to tell you how to do it. You use all the data from your prospects and existing sales. You find out what questions were asked and what were their answers. And then you find out if the sale ultimately resulted. I mean, many times it didn't, right? Because there are a lot of people that your salespeople pitched to and your customers didn't buy. I mean, unless you're one of those rare companies where someone buys every single time they walk in the door. You also have to know how to build a probability table, and that's important within a sales cycle. And that's also what we do at Smith & Farmer. Okay, so here's an example of a sales cycle. Pick up the phone. If you're doing outbound sales, you dial the number and you say hello. If it's inbound, then obviously you've placed an advertisement and a prospect is calling you. So you, the rep, you say something, and then the prospect says something, and then maybe the prospect hangs up and goes away, or maybe the prospect keeps talking, and you ask a question, and or maybe the customer asks a question, and then the customer answers blah, 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 and then maybe you ask a question, customer answers blah, 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 and then some event happens, something like, well, do you want to do it? Or maybe the customer says, I need to talk to my spouse, or maybe a meeting is set up to get together to do a demonstration. Something happens. Then maybe another event happens. I said, okay, let's set it up, let's schedule a time, let me get back to you, let me schedule another phone call. Another event of some kind happens. Then you might even do a trial close where the customer, you ask the customer if they're ready to buy, and they say yes, and it's delivered, bill sent, money in the bank. That's an example sales cycle. Okay, real easy. Here's another way of looking at a sales cycle. Let's say you are doing door-to-door sales, or let's say in one of our clients' examples, Mosquito Nix, they sell mosquito misting systems, basically a pest control company, which is a big problem down here in the South. Let's say every time a man answers the door, the rep says hello. Okay, I mean that's part of a sales cycle, right? Let's say from your experience, 2% of the time, if they say hello, you're going to get a sale. Now, really, maybe that number's higher. I just threw that number in here for this presentation. Maybe 1 out of 10. Maybe it's 1 out of 3 every time you go on a lead call. Okay, whatever that number is, the probability is based on experience. It's not based on, oh, they have a nice house, so I'm guessing that they're going to buy. Or, in my experience on this street, people buy 20% of the time. Well, that may be true, but unless you've calculated based on statistical analysis, based on historical experience, you don't know what that number is. So you have to put in what's really based on experience. Okay? That's extremely important. This is not guessing here. So maybe when they said, when the rep asks, do you have a mosquito problem? When they've identified a need, and the answer, when that prospect actually articulates, yes, I do. Okay? Not, well, I'm sure they have a mosquito problem because they have a lot of grass and trees and shaded areas. No. I mean, when this question is asked and that customer or prospect at this point articulates, actually comes out of their mouth, yes, I do have a problem, then there is some kind of historical evidence showing what the probability to close is based on that bell curve, right? I mean, this is just purely science. We're not talking about how good the sales rep is. Did they say something really clever? Did they get the prospect to jump up and down and throw leaves in the air? I mean, no. It's just simply based on historical experience. Okay? So when that rep asks, can you afford it? Here's how much it costs. Can you afford it? And the prospect says, yes, I can afford it. Money won't be an issue. You're 35% of the way there. Okay, does your spouse approve? Yes, he or she does. And you're 80% closed. Will you buy it today? Yes, I will. 98% closed. There is a probability to close chart there. Now, notice on the right-hand column, 2%, 10%, 35, 80, big jump, 98%. Okay, we need to fill in some gaps here. There's some steps missing here. Or if maybe they're not missing based on the way you've been doing it, why don't we try to fill in some gaps? And again, this is what we do at Smith & Farmer. But let me show you how we do it. We do it with questions. Questions. I like this picture here. What are these? These are all weapons. What kind of weapons are these? These are all offensive weapons. These are weapons that you attack with. And I consider sales in the sales process to be kind of like a battle. I mean, I want to win the battle. And this is my own little private battle in my head going on. The prospect at this point doesn't know I'm having this battle. This is just for my own little personal ego, okay? And everybody has an ego to a certain degree. And so I think it's important to treat sales in a way that you want to win. I mean, you have to be emotionally positive. I just think you do. And you have to like what you do. So the way I find out what's in a prospect's head is I ask questions. But there's no reason to think that I couldn't standardize these questions, right? I mean, why can't I write these questions down and use this as part of my process? And again, I've gotten real good at this. That's what we at Smith & Farmer do, is help you develop these offensive weapons. So let me show you how to use them. Let's fill in some gaps. Okay, you remember, man answers the door, says hello, 2%. Well, let's say it's an inbound lead. It's something that came in from a phone call, and we can track and see how many of these leads convert into sales. So we put that number in. For presentation purposes, I just put 3%. Let's say they have a suitable yard. There may be some yards that are not suitable. So when they have a suitable yard, that alone is a 5%. We can plug that number in. Now, if they say they have a need, 10%, there it is. Sometimes these customers may have already talked to competitors. So if we ask them, which we were able to discover during our consulting process, if we ask them if you compare systems, and they have, but we're still there, okay? We're still there able to present and maybe beat up on the competition a little bit, then that increases our odds, okay? So we want to put that variable in there. What are you looking for in a misting system? Now also, they have to actually, the prospect has to give you an answer, okay? We're not looking for what your rep is guessing the answer should be or could be and what you guess it is. These are all questions that we're actually standardizing and now using with the prospect. We also ask them, how will you know the right system? Okay, well, when they say yours seems to be the right system and they give you a real explanation, that might mean a 30% close to sale. Okay, and this has all been tested and proven once we get into this. And that's also what we do at Smith & Farmer. Now, do you want it to be concealed? You know, the system itself. And they say yes. Okay, going to the next slide. Can you afford it? Yes, I can. 40% close. I'll skip this trial close here. So anyway, these other questions that we ask and they give you an articulate answer, that clicks the probabilities. Okay, now remember that slide that had the steps going up the forest? Okay, think of this right-hand column obviously as steps up the forest. No one step is any harder than the other one. You know, there's no one step unless you went from 40% directly to 80%. Well, that would be kind of a long step, right? Well, psychologically, that would be a big step, a big leap for the salesperson and for the prospect. That's why it's important to put these steps in here. We're building our sales cycle to where the steps are reasonable. Okay, imagine that if you're asking the question, how would this system change your lifestyle? And your customer gives you an articulate answer, regardless whether you're selling a mosquito system or a Corvette or whatever it is that you're selling. How hard would it be to just simply ask the next question? Well, how do y'all entertain outside? And they give you an articulate answer. Okay, now the step was not a hard step, right? It was a real easy step because it wasn't that hard to ask that question once you had the first question answered, right? I mean, no one's feeling threatened. Your prospect doesn't feel like you're giving them a hard close or anything like that, right? We're not slamming anybody or pressuring anybody at all. You're just asking questions. And they're just steps, right? No one step is any harder than the other one. Going back to that slide in the forest, there are tree branches. There are things that might poke out and stick you. And so you have to stay on that path. And that's what a good sales manager is supposed to be doing, is making sure that rep is staying on the path. Now, that doesn't mean that the rep can't get creative and you can't move up and down that path, just like it was a real tangible path that you can walk up and down. There's an old expression in sales, fog of war. You know, where the bombs are going off and the bullets are zinging over your head, you know, the fog of war, like in military. When the general says you've got to charge up that hill and take that hill, you can't be distracted. Your training has to kick in where the fog of war isn't distracting you. If a prospect says, hey, come over and look at my tool shed and look at the stuff I've been working on. I mean, sometimes sales reps get so much trust built up with a prospect that they become their buddy. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's actually happened to me before. Well, you have to remember not to get off that path. Don't let that's part of the fog of war. The bullets and the bombs are going off around you. You have to remember what you're there for. You're there to go up that sales cycle. You're there to go up that path. It doesn't mean you can't go over and look at the tool shed, but that means you have to jump right back into the sales cycle, right back on that path. Okay? So that's how a sales cycle works. Now, what have we done? We broke apart the sales cycle into its pieces. That sales cycle always existed, whether you, the sales rep, sales manager, or owner, knew it or not. This is what was happening. Either in the minds of the prospects or in the minds of the reps, but maybe it wasn't spoken. It wasn't ever really got out there on the table. But something made these customers buy. It's very important that's what we do at Smith & Farmer, is to be able to find out why your customers are buying, and sometimes more importantly, why your no sales are not buying. And that's also what we do. We find out why your no sales didn't buy, and that can be included in your sales cycle. We focus on moving one step at a time, and just like I was telling you about my son, it's easier to eat a burger one bite at a time. The movement from 10 to 20% takes exactly the same amount of stress, maybe time, energy, mental capacity as 50 to 60 or 90 to 100. You know, when all this is said and done and you say, why don't I go ahead and get a credit card number from you? That's just as much a non-event or event, however you want to look at it, stress-free event, as answering the door. Okay? Are any light bulbs going off? Oh, I hope I'm getting some email from you all if the light bulb is going off at all. Basically, this is paint by numbers methodology of selling. But you still have to be creative within a framework. My point is, when you're doing consultative selling and you have a sales rep that has to have a relationship that builds trust, that builds your brand, and builds trustworthiness of your company in the minds of your prospects and your customers, robots never going to be able to do this. So everything I've talked about so far is easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? And I hate this expression. I'm sorry about that. But this is also what my 6-year-old came home with last year from kindergarten when I said, Murray, how was kindergarten today? Oh, it was easy peasy lemon squeezy. And I thought, okay, maybe you're in a too easy of a school, but it was too easy for him. But that's really, you know, everything I've talked about so far is easy, right? I mean, none of this is rocket science. It's just a different way of looking at sales. If you're dealing with statistical analysis, all you have to do as a sales rep is just step up those steps once that sales cycle has been defined, right? I mean, easy. And what's great for a sales manager is all you have to do is watch their reports to see where they are on the sales cycle. So that now, what a sales manager can do, your sales meetings need to be, okay, I see you bunching up at 30%. How do we get you past 30% to 40%? And you can ask your other reps or give advice or coach or whatever you want to do, which is also what we do at Smith & Farmer. If you're having problems getting from 30 to 40%, at least we know maybe some suggestions on how to do that. And we can see exactly where that rep is having problem. Not, hey, you got 40 deals out there and you can't close them. Well, close them. Ask for the order. I mean, have you ever heard that before? I mean, no, it's none of that. It's, let me see your analysis. Let me see your tick sheets. Let me see your reports. And, okay, let me see where you're having a problem, sales rep. And, okay, let's see, 50 to 60%, you're having a problem there. Well, our other sales rep, Joe, that's not where he's having a problem. Let's get some of Joe's advice on what it takes to get that prospect from 50 to 60%. Is this starting to make sense? Okay, but let me tell you, one of the biggest benefits of having a custom sales system like this is that you can now forecast. You can now predict your sales. Let me ask you, if you had a crystal ball, okay, which would predict the future, I mean, how cool would that be, right? And what if you had a crystal ball where you could actually control the outcome? Think about this as it relates to your income, your ability to own assets, like, do you want to buy a house? Do you want to buy a fancy car? Do you want to buy whatever it is that you want to buy? I mean, with this crystal ball and the ability to control it, what would that mean to your employment, to your future, everything? Well, you just might have that tool now. Let me show you how. In discussing the same concept of statistical analysis, let's talk about forecasting. And as it relates to sales, and this chart might look vaguely similar to some of the charts that I've already created in this presentation, right? 3 columns here. Let's imagine an event, a coin toss. Okay, you got heads on one side, tails on another. You flip it, win or lose, it's going to be the result. Okay, going to the second row, first column, coin toss, let's flip it 10 times. You still have the same odds, the same standardized variables, right? Whether it's Murray throwing a dart, whether it's whatever it is, we're not going to change the variables. You still have heads and tails. On average, you're going to win 5 times, you're going to lose 5 times. So if I flip it 10 times based on this experiment, I'm going to get a result. Let's say I want to win. I'm going to win 5 times. That's very predictable. That's nothing that emotion has anything to do with, right? Industries have been built on this, like Las Vegas, the gambling. They just set it to where you lose 48% of the time, and the house wins 52% of the time. So this is very predictable. analysis. So if you flip that coin 484 times, then you're going to win half the time and you're going to lose half the time, right? Science. Can't do a thing about it. Right, now I want you to meet my father-in-law. And my father-in-law caught this big old fish. He caught this fish on a yaya lure. And yep, those are my boys, and that's out at our lake house. When it comes to statistical analysis, there's a perfect metaphor here that I want to share with you. I'll call him Yaya. Yaya is Chinese for granddad, and he likes to make his own lures, and they are hysterical. And I don't know if any of you fish, but he makes these things that I call Yaya lures, and they might be a bobber tied onto a piece of cloth, tied onto a jig or a spinner. I mean, these things look hysterical, and I shake my head and tell him not to use that, and he'll use them. And every once in a blue moon, he'll catch a fish with this thing. Now, in our lake, we have this thing called shad. They're like minnows. You catch them with a net, and everything in the lake eats shad. And 40% of the time that you fish with shad, or he fishes with shad, he catches a fish. With a yaya lure, he only catches a fish 5% of the time. Now, I noticed that he'll sit down on the dock for 20 minutes, and he might get up and then go water the garden or do something else, but he'll catch a fish 5% of the time. So the statistical analysis math on that using a yaya lure is 0.05, which is the decimal version of 5%, multiplied by a yaya lure, which is also 5%. You get 0.0025% of the time, or 0.25%, which is 1/4 of 1% of the time he actually catches a fish, okay, in a 20-minute time frame. But if he uses shad, he'll catch a shad 5% of the time times 40% using shad equals 0.20, or 20% of the time. Now, sometimes Yaya will sit down there for 8 hours. He'll sit down there all day long, and he'll catch a fish 80% of the time. And if he's using a Yaya lure, using this same math, 0.80, which is a decimal version of 80%, times 0.05, a Yaya lure, is 0.04, or 4% of the time. He can sit down there all day long, and 4% of the time, he'll catch a fish. But if he uses shad, he'll actually catch one 32% of the time. Very forecastable, very predictable, because it's mathematical. Okay? Now, some days it might not be the same, but if I wanted to adjust the weather or the water temperature or whatever, I could do that. Right? I could add different variables in this. I could calculate it based on 4 hours or 2 days of fishing or a different bait. The fact remains is that now I have the ability to forecast whether Yaya is going to catch a fish or not. Okay, so how do we do this with our new Smith & Farmer sales cycle? Well, I'm going to add all these components in here, right? This is the same forecastability, probability to close sales cycle that I showed you earlier. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's write that table a little bit different way. If I say, for example, if I'm working a lot of leads and I've got a lot of deals in my pipeline, and pipeline is another way of saying in my sales cycle or on my path, right? So I've got all these deals in my pipeline, and I have 4 of them, let's say, that middle column there, 10% of the way down my sales cycle. Now, if you look at the top of the right-hand column, let's say, for example, I'm selling a product that the average sale is $5,000. Well, it stands to reason, based on everything we've been talking about so far in this presentation, statistical probability, non-emotional, just simply math, right? The probability of a close. I can actually take $5,000, multiply it by the middle column 4, and multiply that again by 10%. And I come up with a number that's at the top right-hand column of $2,000. 5,000 times 4 is $20,000, and 10% of that is $2,000, right? Well, I can do that same math all the way down. And then I add up my column, and I get $41,875. This is basically saying if I have 4 prospects plus 3 prospects plus 5 prospects plus 7 plus 2, if I've got my whole pipeline, and based on where they are in that process, multiplied by the average sale, what I expect that sale to be, I come up with a number that's really pretty accurate. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I've done this over and over again. And this is extremely important when you're trying to run a business. If you're the owner and you're trying to manage cash flow, you're trying to expand, you're trying to hire people, you're trying to buy inventory, if you carry inventory, forecastability is extremely important. And it's also extremely important if you're a salesperson and you're getting paid X amount of commission. If you make 10% commission or whatever the number is, then you can actually predict your income. and whether or not you can make your payments on another Corvette or make your payments on a lake house, or in what period of time you could maybe pay for your whole lake house, pay cash for it. So forecastability is everything. Okay, so again, how can Smith & Farmer help you? Well, obviously, we build your custom sales cycle steps. Okay, this is what we do, is I have to spend time understanding and auditing, doing a sales audit, and understand exactly what's going on currently with your sales cycle. And then we build that, fill in the gaps on objection handling, doing trial closes. And by the way, you remember on that other screen where I mentioned a trial close. A trial close is where you ask for the business, you ask for the order, not exactly with the intent of expecting the prospect to say, oh yeah, stop, let me get my credit card out. No. You do that to find out what the real objections are. The trial closes are a way of asking for business in a way that's not pushy, but it gets the objections, finding out why they won't buy, to bubble up to the top. So then you can get that prospect back on track and find out really why they won't buy. Okay, so that's very, very important. So objection handling, trial closes, your scripts, what kind of scripts do you need to be using, whether you're face-to-face or on the phone, whether you're developing new business from scratch or you're dealing with inbound leads. All that goes into your sales cycle, and that's what we do at Smith & Farmer. We also can implement, using our real-time customer relationship management, our CRM, sales management system, using your iPhones, your Androids, to be able, if you're in the field with a rep, just click where you are, tick off where you are on the sales cycle. We can then coach you. We can see from our offices in Dallas, once we get to know you, once we understand and develop your sales cycle for you, we can actually be your coach for you. Or your sales manager or your owner can be your coach. So ask us about our CRM tool. We also can create a video library for your on-site support. So for example, if your sales reps have their Androids or iPhones in their hand and they're out talking to a prospect with an objection, an objection comes up from your prospect you hear frequently, you might want to create a video, like a referral video of one of your customers that love you on a common objection that comes up. So maybe one way of handling that, which we've done for our clients in the past, is create a little customer testimonial video that your rep can say, you know what, this is going to be great technology and you're going to love it, but you know what, don't take my word for it. Listen to what Betty, one of our customers, says. Boom, click a button and there's a video. So how else can we help you? Like I said, objection handling scripts, trial closes, developing outbound and inbound sales. You may even want to have us build a telesales organization for you. We can actually build that for you. Typically what we do as well is get no sale data research. Because we are a consulting firm and third party, we can talk a disarming way to some of your prospects that didn't buy from you. And we can find out in a very effective way why they didn't buy from you, and we can incorporate that into your objection handling. Maybe it's your technology and your product itself that you may want to change that you didn't even know was a problem, or maybe it was something that your sales reps were saying or doing that you didn't even know became a real negative part of the sales process, and we can turn that negative into a positive for you. So what I'd like for you to let us do is develop your custom sales cycle for you. We're talking about a very short engagement and really very, very reasonably priced as well. So we'd basically do a couple of days where we'd do a sales audit, would analyze your customer and your prospect responses. We would create your consistent selling steps, develop your scripts, your objection handling, and your trial closes, and then would actually help you implement. Then we would also make sure that your sales reps are actually implementing this. And we can even act as your virtual sales manager. We can actually conduct a sales meeting for you, working with your sales manager, helping your sales manager become more effective, and show you how to use and manage the reports that we were talking about. So now everybody's working for a common goal. You're working off a sales process, a sales system, instead of saying, hey, how many deals do you have going? Okay, when are you going to close? I can't tell you how many companies that really should know better that I've met over the last 20 years, that's how they conduct their sales meetings. We want to act as your virtual sales manager, and when you need us, we'd like to show you our software. Okay, so here's an example of our technology. Basically, your reps can be in the field. They just click where they are in the process. Based on a customer ID, they can add notes. And if they want a coach, they can click on the coach button. And if you have this service with us, we can instantly get on real time and post a note that will help that rep within that sales process. So if there's a problem or there's a suggestion that that rep needs help on, if they're at, say for example, at 40%, they can't get that prospect to 50% and they need a coach, then the sales manager, who might be the coach, or one of our consultants might be the coach, we can step in real time to that rep's handheld and really help them out. We can also put the video and media library on there, so there's no reports, no paperwork, nothing for those reps to fill out. Now, what do the sales managers see? Well, here's an example. They can see that, for example, this is rep number 34. They can see how many deals they have in their pipeline and where they are in that process. And each one of these links can be drilled down on. Now, notice the color coding here. The sales manager can preset color coding. So, for example, if there's a bunching up at 30% closed, getting a lot of deals at 30%, but that rep seems to have a problem going to 40%. Well, that'll automatically send an alert to the sales manager and say, okay, here's where we've pinpointed the problem. Let's see if we can figure out, working together, a solution to go from 30 to 40%. So that might be the topic of the next sales meeting. And where collectively the sales gang can get together and discuss how to help each other get from one percentage to another percentage. Everybody can improve and everybody can work on this together. So, for example, if the sales manager wants to drill down on a specific deal and see the notes, those notes can be left there just like the fancy CRM tools. And this is an amazing, inexpensive tool that we can make available to you. Thanks so much for sticking with this presentation. If you have any questions or concerns, please call me anytime, 214-377-1378, or shoot me an email at msmith@customsellingsystem.com. Thanks so much. Take care. God bless.